Greetings, everyone. This is Dr. Ray Lindley. I'm the Executive Director of Ray Global. You will notice that you don't have my normal wall behind me with all of those stickers and plaques and so forth. I have the privilege right now of being in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and I'm on most of your time zones or just an hour away. This is the first international trip because of COVID that we've been able to make for over a year, maybe a year and a half. So we're really grateful. And of course, for those of you who are in Saudi Arabia and you've worked with me, you know, I love it here. The people are so good. I've visited some wonderful, wonderful schools. And I'm so pleased that in light of everything else that's going on, that we have schools that are just plowing ahead. And I want to introduce two people for you, and one of them we'll have more later. Danny Eichelberger is here. Danny has recently been secured by us to be another associate director. So we have Dr. Jake, who's the executive associate director, and Danny and Dr. Magoub Al-Arabi, who is the other associate director. And right next to Mr. Danny, you see Mr. Khalid Muhammad. And Mr. Khalid Muhammad has just been, within the last 2 weeks, has just been secured the position of regional coordinator in Saudi Arabia. He will work directly with Dr. Magoub, and he will specifically be working in the Jeddah, Taif, Abha, Tabuk, and that general area, Mecca. We have several schools coming on in Mecca, and we're really happy to have both of you two gentlemen with us, and we'll hear more from Danny in a second. But welcome to everybody. We're just glad to have you here. And as usual, during the presentation by Mr. Danny here in just a minute, if you have some specific questions or if you need some explanation of something that he's talking about, put it in the chat box, and either Dr. Jake or I will try to, at the appropriate time, mention to maybe break in a bit with the workshop, or we might do it at the end, because we usually have questions at the end that aren't covered in the workshop. So we're just really excited to have you all here. It's so good to be back in school, and we know things are still a little bit different, but we're happy to have you all here. Dr. Jake, you have anything that you want to say before we
Yeah,
talk about Mr.
yeah. Thanks, Dr. Ray. Thanks for the welcome. It's great to be with you again and helping you and supporting your schools. One way that we want to support your schools and your students and helping them be engaged is a writing contest. This is an awesome writing contest that we have partnered with Epicenter Education, and students can submit essays or a piece of poetry. And there will be prizes. Certificates will be provided for all the students. And so we'd love to have as many students involved as possible. The topic of the essay is how to make my world a better place. What an awesome thing to be talking about right now with the pandemic, with some of the political things going on. We need to recognize and remember what great people there are in the world and the work and the support that you as educators bring to your students. So make sure you sign up, have your students sign up for this writing contest. The last date of submissions is in a couple more weeks. So make sure that they're involved and they're getting there. Oh, October 31st. So we still have over a month to submit something onto this great activity that we have. Other than that, Dr. Ray, I think the biggest thing is if you have questions or you need any kind of support, Array Global is here to help you. And we have consultants. We have a lot of people who are willing to step in at any time to help you and support you as you navigate, many of you, through the COVID situation that we're working through. And as many of you are opening back up, we'd love to be part of that process with you. If you'd like to join us as far as accreditation, we'd love to have you. We're having many schools join us from Saudi Arabia. That's why Dr. Ray is in Saudi Arabia. Many of you are from Egypt and some other places. We'd love to work with you also in any of those countries. This year, we're providing a golden year discount. So our annual fees are cheaper. They're $500 less, so they're $2,000. And there is no transfer fee. And so we'd love to have any of your schools in this improvement process. We also recommend that everyone get on to our social media. Not only do we focus on things that are coming up, but we try to have a lot of inspirational items, some words of wisdom from Dr. Ray. We also have some professional development short clips that we provide on there for you to be inspired and educated to provide the best services for your students. So again, welcome. If there's any questions that we can help you with, please let us know.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Jake. And I'm so pleased to introduce a wonderful person who we've worked with, and he's been in a lot of our countries already in his previous position with the Las Vegas School District, and now he's ours. And so we're happy to have Mr. Danny Eichelberger, and he will be presenting the workshop today, as you know, from the advertisement and so forth. He is presenting the workshop on writing with purpose, which is appropriate right now since we're having the competition that we are. Writing with purpose, from good to great. So Danny, it's all yours. It's great to have you here. And I know that the next hour will be well spent by you who are watching us or who are with us.
Thank you, Dr. Lindley. And I appreciate you, Dr. Frankum, and really nice to meet you, Dr. Muhammad. So this is a great opportunity and one I've looked forward to. We've been doing a lot of work. So in my current role, we looked at the competition coming up and the writing contest, and we thought, well, let's really just spend our time talking about what good writing looks like and how we can move students to really effective writers. What we're noticing in schools, probably globally, but definitely nationally for us here in the US, is that students have a pretty significant gap in their writing skills. Speaking and listening, those things for us in assessments have gone up. Students spend a lot of time on computers in the last 2 years, getting to know their teachers, getting to know, read and look at content differently and speak to their teachers probably more than usual and to their peers. So in some ways, computer technology has benefited us in this shutdowns that we've experienced over the last 2 years. I say 2 years because for me, the last time I was in the Middle East, I was in Erbil, Iraq back in November of 2019. So for me, it's been way too long. I really miss these visits, and we look forward to seeing you soon. So I mentioned the time distance because it really has been, I think, longer than we think that things have been off skew or not normal. And for our students, we've noticed when they've come back, and we've talked about a few of these things over the last year together, is behaviors are obviously students are struggling, they're socializing and coming back. But there's also some significant gaps in their writing and in some of their instructional factors. So for us, mathematics has really slid. So we're trying to really work on how do we make students very efficient writers? And a lot of that starts with, and I'll share my screen. And I'm gonna move us around here a little bit so I can. Let's see. Having a little tough time sharing my screens appropriately. Hold on one sec. Let me get back into this and make sure that I'm sharing appropriately.
It looks good on our end.
What I'm having trouble is in the system controlling my backwards and forwards. It's just it's moving on its own, so I don't know why.
Uh-oh. Do you want me to put it up on mine?
Let's see. Yeah, if you don't mind, could you put it up on yours, and then maybe we can manage that together?
Yep.
It's not giving me control features. Okay, thank you, Dr. G. Frankum. And we'll wait for that to pop on. One of the things that, as he's loading that, I want to talk about in these, we'll do it in present mode. One of the things that we find is that in a full writing cycle, and when you're doing a writing workshop, there's a lot to that. And we're going to be together for what, another 45 minutes to 50 minutes. I want to use your time super effectively. And the one way that I thought about doing that is, what do students see most likely as they encounter writing opportunities in real life situations. And what are a lot of the assessments that we look at for students? It is generally, if we'll go to the next screen, has to do with how we respond to something that we've encountered. And so today we're gonna focus on when students have the opportunity to explain, to persuade, or to argue. And we don't mean argue in the sense of, yelling argument, meaning they're stating their purpose and they're defending their points. And a lot of times when we talk about explaining, we're saying we gather facts and combine with experience to clarify who or what something is, how it happened, or why something happened. These are skills that students use every day, but they don't necessarily we've noticed that in their socially, they're really adept at talking through issues. And like I said, these last 2 years haven't pushed us backwards there, but the writing and the ability to say clearly what we think in writing has been an issue. So we want to talk about their ability to persuade, use appeals of logic, emotion, and character to prove a point. And the other one is to argue, special kind of persuasion that fairly and accurately appeals to logic, emotion, and character. So a lot of times what we see, so when we talk about writing, I want to limit our focus today to those types of writing. So I don't want to do we're not going to talk about all elements of writing today. We're really going to be super specific. And I think we have a saying, and I think it's probably in America, it's like, where do you get the biggest bang for your buck? And I think that probably means is where can I spend my energy and get the most out of it in the quickest amount of time? Because we know that students have, we have limited amount of instructional time in the day, but we know that if we concentrate our focus in certain areas, we're going to get great gains for students. And I know that as I studied this and researched it, we know that the things that we're going to present today are going to give you the biggest gains in the quickest amount of time. And it doesn't matter what grade level, they're going to help you gain the greatest amount of focus and move students from good to great. So we can go to the next screen. Thanks, Dr. Frankum. So what we're going to talk about first is typically prompts. And most of the time in any subject, we always have students reading something. It doesn't matter if it's a science passage, if it's mathematics, we got to read something to know what we're being asked, what's being asked of us. We might read an essay, a short novel, a long novel. We're going to be asked questions, and there's going to be prompts and things that we're going to need to respond to in real life and in our world of education and assessments. So what are writing prompts? Writing prompts are short text, statements, or images that help students kickstart their writing process and direct their writing in specific ways. Writing prompts are a useful strategy because, one, they encourage student creativity and increase interest in writing. Dr. Frankum, do you mind reading that second bullet?
Yes.
Offer student.
Yeah, it offers students choices and opportunities to practice their writing skills. And I think that's so important to really focus on because there were some comments in there, Mr. Danny, about writing in other subject areas. And I was just posting in the chat, writing needs to be implemented in all classes, as Dr. Ray just posted in the chat. In all subject areas. In the school district that I work in, we require all subject areas to focus on it, even those that are PE or in our shop classes where they weld and they make wood products, because it gives them more choices and more opportunities with those different subject areas. Some students are just, they're more inclined to focus on things that they're good at, that they really like, that's what they really want to write on. So yeah, some really good comments coming in on the chat on that.
And it definitely dignifies writing. It definitely dignifies writing. If they only have to write in the English class, okay, when I'm out of English, I don't have to write anymore. But if all teachers cooperate together on some, I believe that 2 of the subjects, or maybe 3 of the subjects that we really need to coordinate: English, math, and science. Those can be coordinated into every subject area. And I think that's what Danny's saying here.
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry, Danny, we interrupted
you.
you.
No, I appreciate it. I really do like and need the input. And one thing I would say is we know that students are more motivated when they have choice. And so I will tell you that although I'm starting this with, I believe this is going to give you the greatest gains, what students do need choice. And one way we can do that is when we look and start and interact with a text and we know that we're going to have to respond, we're going to have to speak to it, or we're going to have to write about it. We, as a student, as a learner, I like to obviously pick my level of interest in what I'm trying to gain from what someone's trying to gain from a piece of literature is always different. And so we have to give them the opportunity to search it from their opportunity. Sometimes, and obviously assessment, it's given to them and they have to be able to write. And we believe that we can help both of those. The purpose for writing for fun and also writing for purpose and intent. Dr. Lindley, do you mind reading that next bullet?
Enable students or direct student? Direct
Enable,
student write. Enable students to draw on and write using their own experiences and ideas. Yay.
Yeah, awesome. Mr. Muhammad, do you mind reading the direct?
He's on mute.
Oh, Mr. Muhammad, I think you're on mute. Do you mind reading that next bullet? I'll get it. Maybe we'll get the next one. We could direct student writing, narrative, expository, or persuasive. And remember, today we're going to talk more about that persuasive and making your points clear and help students attain their writing goals. And in the last bullet, help students identify genres and explore different styles of writing. Okay, this is our goal as teachers, and it doesn't matter the grade level, it doesn't matter the subject. We really have to make them proficient writers, because proficient writers are obviously very critical thinkers. And I want to talk about that. Let's go to the next slide.
Well, before we do that, Mr. Danny, there was a question about engaging students in primary grades, specifically kindergarten. And when you read that, the bottom part about identifying genres and explore different styles, I know that's one thing that I've seen in kindergartens where they're teaching them about the different genres. Because in kindergarten, they're having a hard enough time kind of writing their name. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. You know, and there's always strategy, right? Because, you know, typically in grades K through 2, a lot of times we're learning to write, and we're learning that process. We're learning grammar, we're learning structure, we're learning a lot about the basic skeleton of what it looks like to write a very clear and concise thought. We typically start with very short paragraphs, maybe even short sentences, maybe even words. And for really new learners, we even start with pictures. So we sometimes, and I know if this is coming from one of our primary teachers, a lot of times we are still wanting to write to learn. So at some point you're writing because you have something to express and learn. And you can do both in those primary grades. It just looks a little bit different. I'm going to do a couple examples today. And if those do not answer the question about how we can engage our primary classes, let's go back to it at the end. And let's move to that next slide. So the first thing that I want to talk about is anytime we have students that are responding to a text, we have to start, and we know we talked about writing, but we also have to talk about critical reading. Because if we're going to make good writers, they have to see and be modeled great writing. And they also have to know how to interact with the text. I know that I read things all the time that I don't necessarily know all of the content. I have to, just like a student, as we as adult readers pick up a lot of good strategies along the way. We talk to a friend, we talk to our spouse, or we talk to a colleague, or we look for context clues. We grab a dictionary, we look at the glossary, the table of contents, we make notes in there. We do that because we've been doing it for a long time. But with students, we have to be super deliberate about teaching them how to think and how to be critical and how to try to poke holes in something that they're hearing, so that everything that they read, they can try to internalize it, understand it for themselves, and have belief in it. So we talk about marking or annotating. It's probably one of the greatest things that we can give to our reading side of this equation. Marking and annotating the text is an active reading strategy that requires students to think critically as they read. This procedure provides tools for understanding complex text and rigorous text. It's a fundamental strategy that requires you to isolate text to which you can refer later. I'm going to show you why this is important when we talk about our writing, is we write in response to different pieces and passages. We sometimes, what I would tell you is, if you're going to have students read a multiple paragraph passage, have them number the paragraph so they can refer back to it. For those of you that have been with me in the past, we've done some seminars where we debated different issues. We numbered the passages because we wanted to go back and refer to them to our colleagues and say, hey, well, in passage number 2, the author said this, and we can reflect back on it. It makes us more powerful readers, but it also adds to our writing. When we're writing and we can refer back to a professional or to research, it strengthens our writing. We're going to circle key terms, things we understand and that can help prove our point and help us in our writing. We're going to underline information that's relative to the reading purpose. So when you set the purpose for a student, we're going to talk about how to set the purpose. They're going to drive their instruction and know what they're looking for when they read. Sometimes when we read, especially with primary children, it can be very scattered. There are a lot of things can happen in a 20 or 30 minute small group instruction. But if we drive the purpose and we tell them, okay, in this passage, we want to know why the main character, why he told these 3 stories, or whatever it is, then we know that now that we have the students driving into a purpose, they're now looking at the book from a different perspective, and they're not wandering all over the place. You're guiding them to what you're looking for, and which is again going to inform their writing. Number 4, identify the gist. Yeah, go ahead, Dr.
I was just going to say, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, in some cases their readings are in textbooks or in actually hardbound books. And so I have a thought about how that could happen, what you just said, and that's to provide sticky notes for the students so that they don't actually, but anyway, do you have any other ideas? Because in some cases they're classroom sets of books and you don't want them writing in the books.
Right, that's a great point. Sticky notes is a major support for this, because you really want them to be interacting with the text, especially in those younger grades. So I highly encourage sticky notes. I think that was great, Dr. Lindley, and also writing composition books. So again, if you've numbered your paragraphs, they can number the paragraphs and give those numbers. They're not obviously repeating the paragraphs. They're just reciting the numbers of the paragraph, and they're making notes and jotting down key terms and words. So you could actually have them put that into composition when I'm supporting teachers in my work now, as we go to a reading folder or in our own binders. The other one is identifying the gist of the reading selection. I think it's a very powerful tool when you take when you take some writing and you sort of summarize it down to its core. What am I talking about? What am I saying? It's a strategy we use as adults all the time. We take big chunks of information and we try to simplify it so that when we're talking to our peers, other professionals, when we're helping students, we're trying to make the focus clear. And then number 5, writing questions about the content. That's huge. If you can get to the point where you're asking yourself questions about the content, then you've taken students to the highest level. To me, then now you've made them critical thinkers, and you've made them it's kind of what's the word? Metacognition. Their ability to think about their own thinking is one of the highest levels of service we can give to kids. And it's not easy, but with practice and with time, we can get there. Now, I don't want to spend too much time in annotating, because some of you may do that already. If somebody would like to jump in, if somebody has a way in which they help students look at text, mark text, or annotate, please feel free to jump in. Does anyone have anything they want to mention here?
Yeah, that might be a good idea, Danny, for people to post it in the chat and just write down ways that they engage their students in reading. Because when you started talking about this, 2 things came to mind. Is that good readers are good writers. That's one of the big things, is you have to learn how to read and assess the text before you can write well. And that's the main focus that you're presenting on. The other thought that I had is that when we look at these 5 different strategies, it doesn't mean that the whole class has to do it all at once. A student can do it by themselves. I've seen it done really well in partners, where they're sitting and reading some concepts together, and then you're engaging students with each other and making sure that they're following up with each other. So I really like these 5 different tools in helping students to learn to read better and focus on the content, which in turn helps them become better writers.
Yes, absolutely.
I especially
Thank you
like
so much.
that you are linking reading with writing, because I agree with Dr. Jake. Good readers usually make good writers. For one thing, you learn structure, you learn spelling. I mean, these are minor things, but you learn following concepts. And I'm looking at your 5 items there, Danny, and those are things, they might look to be kind of a little bit difficult. But if you think about this, I look at number 3, underlining information relevant to the reading purpose. That helps students focus in on what is being said, which will help them in their writing. Can we look at something in your selection that really focuses what this is all about? It helps students from going off into a tangent in writing that doesn't have anything to do with what they're saying or what they're writing.
Oh, and Danny, there's some good thoughts in there. Miss Fatima writes some interesting things, especially for the younger grades where they could analyze words, circle prefixes, underline suffixes, those kind of things. That's another great way to get into this.
Yeah, it helps develop meaning of words. And I think in vocabulary that helps them become, yep, great. Thank you, Ms. Fatma. That's awesome.
Oh, Hoda, good comment. How much
That's great.
you read,
So you're
how
reading
much
and
you
writing,
write.
we're drawing
Well,
correlation.
yeah, great.
Yep. Excellent. So we'll go back to what you said, Dr. Lindley, underlining information relevant to the reading purpose. Sometimes the reading purpose is clear. It's stated at the beginning. Sometimes in our curriculum, they always give like an essential question or a question to ponder before you start reading. I want to make sure that we know if we don't see that there, make sure to set a purpose for the reading. It helps everybody. It helps you drive your instruction. It helps you in those reading groups, because those reading groups can get even in small group intervention, can be very scattered if we don't have deep purpose when we're reading with students. And that just helps them. Okay, Dr. Frankum, I'm going to go ahead and move to that next slide. And I'm going to give you a couple examples. This is a story here, and we're going to talk about race strategy. And the prompt in that race strategy is telling us right away, here's the essential question. Before I even read this and I'm working with a student, the purpose is to explain how the great auk, this particular non-flight bird with wings, how it became extinct. We're going to look at this passage. I picked 2 short passages today and things that we can do and strategies for students that are very simple for them to think about, respond, and write. So if we can go to the next slide. And I'm going to tell you exactly what a race strategy is, anything we put out here. So if we can go to the next slide, we're going to talk about how to, next one. And we'll show you what we mean.
Is that the right one?
Yep, there we go.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go back one. Let's just sort of read it together. I'm going to give everyone just sort of a minute or two to read it. Those are my notes. I annotated on this myself, but let's just read it. You could read it individually. I'll kind of read it out loud, but I'm just going to give just a sit time. I don't hope anyone gets uncomfortable, but just give yourself about a minute just to read it and process it yourself. And then I'm going to jump in. So I'm going to set the timer and go ahead and start reading this and annotating yourself, just thinking about the content. So I'm going to hit the timer for 1 minute starting right now. Okay, that's 1 minute. We just gave you 1 minute to process that story about the great auk. And this particular bird, as we were reading, our purpose in this reading was to discover why this bird became extinct. I don't think any one of us, any human on planet Earth likes to hear about an animal going extinct. That just is, that always seems kind of tragic. But this particular bird went extinct for a couple purposes. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll tell you how I worked through that and annotated it and looked at it. And some of you can maybe share your strategies. But I would typically, in my mind, I would underline things that catch my attention, like it's a seagoing diving bird. This bird's unable to fly. That's unique to me. That doesn't necessarily help me understand why it becomes extinct, but there are things I was interested in. This bird has a wide range, so I know it can go far without flying. And then I also can look at, I gotta move my faces. Then I started to get into the meat of the issue, which isn't beyond what a little bit about the bird. I started to understand that men on this island, this Funk Island, were slaughtering the great ox and using them for fat, for oil. And the other issue was the natives in that area were eating the bird. So I was starting to see things, I'm starting to see a theme here. It wasn't just one thing, there are two things that helped this bird, unfortunately, become extinct. And so for readers, for students, that may, passages like this, there's always three ways in which you're kind of engaging students, especially at the elementary level. They might be reading at their comfort level, they're reading at their range, at their ability level, they might be reading at grade level, and they might be reading challenging passages that are beyond their current reading level. And that means that they're gaining a lot of support. So in a passage like this, if you were reading this with younger students, maybe even second or third grade, there might be a lot of support to get them to this point. This may be, in a small group, a day or two of just processing a passage is simple. We as adults, we read it in a minute, and we're probably starting to gather a lot of information quickly. So as students start to think beyond the reading, and they spend the appropriate time processing this information, now we're ready to take them to looking at their notes. We know that this animal, we know that the auk was slaughtered, ate, and burned for fuel. So a lot of messy things happened to this bird. But then, if we can go to the next slide, we now want to give students a structure for how to deal with this information. We'll go to the next slide. The great structure, and I will tell you that in every school, my current position, or actually my former position as a principal, I was in, and I don't say this to brag, I say this because we need to share information. I was in the #1 performing elementary in our school district, and it's called Goolsby Elementary. And you've heard me talk about it. And one thing I think was that a lot of the success at the school was that the teachers had structures, and they had structures that they were consistent in all grade levels, and they used it to inform their decisions on how to instruct students, and they used it to help each other as colleagues. So teachers would state on every wall race strategies, and a race strategy is just that. It's an opportunity to race to the top, get better, but the acronym of each letter has meaning. So R stands for restate the question. All good readers know that when they're asked something, they have to be able to restate exactly what's being asked. And we know that in this passage, we're being asked, why did the auk become extinct? And then A, we have to answer all parts of the question. So this is a one-part question. It's kind of straightforward. We know that we're talking about the extinction of a bird, and there's two reasons that bird went extinct. So we've got to list both of those. And then there's C, cite the text to support your answer. So all strong writers, especially when they're doing something that's persuasive or convincing you that they understand the content, they're going to go back and say, and it's just a classic, it's like a trick, but it's something we should use. They say, in the data or the research, the author states, there's little things that we start to prime a sentence that lets the reader know that we've done our homework. We've done the heavy lifting, and we've done the work, and we've read it, and we understand it. And then we have to explain. E is explain your citation. Elaborate on why your evidence helps you prove your point. Okay, it's sometimes we use information and we don't use it appropriately, and it doesn't even strengthen our point. We want to make sure that students are using information that actually strengthens their writing. So if we can go to that next slide, we'll see how these race strategies break down in this particular format.
Yeah, just some thoughts, Danny. First off, while I'm talking, there's a little bit of feedback in your there's some noise, some clicking noises. I don't know if it's your headphones or something like that. Um, but anyway, I really like this race structure because it's something so easy that kids can understand. And I liked how you had it posted too. And I think we should all be very aware that this was a universal. This was something adopted by the entire school that was implemented by each one of the students and by each one of the teachers for each one of the students. And so if the students went to a different teacher, all the students would know about this race process. And I would encourage you as a school to look at some of these universals that you can implement so all the teachers have the same training, they understand the process, and then the students know how to do answer these responses. They have the same structure for these responses. I think these are so powerful in strengthening the reading program that you may have, the writing program that you may have, and it just overall just really strengthens the foundation of each one of those schools. And I think, Mr. Danny, that's probably why you guys were so successful at Goolsby.
Yeah, it's school-wide. It's school-wide. You
Yeah.
do something like this, and if you do it in all classrooms and all teachers are committed to this, imagine how the students will benefit because it's emphasized. And I'll go back to, you can do it in math, you can do it in science, you can do it in PE, you can do it in all subject areas, but it's basically reinforcing the same issues.
Yeah, sorry, Jake. I do hear that buzzing noise. It's coming from my computer. I don't know why. I'm trying to limit these sounds. Okay. So if we look at, is it okay now? Is it any better?
I hear
it's still there.
I hear-
You're not lagging
I hear it.
anymore.
Okay. Sorry
Yeah.
about that. Well, the one thing that we're seeing here, though, is this particular race strategy applied to this particular passage. Well, here's the restate. The restate is the great auk became extinct in a number of ways. And then they say, hey, let's talk about what are those ways. Sailors who landed on Funk Island burned them as fuel, and natives ate them. So I mean, this is a straightforward, as simple as we can get kind of paragraph. But now the writer, the student has cited their two reasons. And then they're going to apply the text, and they're going to find it embedded into the, that we always talk about text embedded. And when we go back into the text and we can state things, it adds power to our writing. According to the text, men spent several months slaughtering great ox and using their fat for oil, and natives enjoyed eating the bird. Okay. And then we're going to qualify what we said. And we're going to say, these quotations show that the bird was used by men for various purposes, leading to its extinction. So we're saying we've got our reasons why the bird went extinct, and why I use these quotations is because it strengthens my argument. There's various reasons, and it led to their extinction. Okay, so it was taking them for their fuel and then eating them. So this bird really didn't stand much of a chance. It was too useful of a bird. It had purposes for the natives. So not a fortunate thing for the great auk. So this particular writer, and we've used this with our students, they're starting to see, oh, okay, I can empower my writing if I know how to introduce a subject, if I know how to restate the question, answer the question, and then close it by supporting with evidence. So this is about one of the more simple ways. And what we're finding is that students, it clarifies more of their speaking. It makes more articulate when they're talking. But it also, in almost every major assessment students get at the end of the year, they're typically a prompt. They're having to read 1, 2, sometimes 3 or 4 very different passages, and they're having to condense that information and respond to it. So if we can get students in the practice of reading critically and responding, we're giving them the biggest support. If we can look at another one. I'll give you another example of one where it's not just as straightforward. In this particular next passage, the book's called Lost Cities. It's from a program we use at our school, and I'm not into programs, so I'll just tell you, it's just a great book. It was a good book. It's about 7 lost cities that were in ancient ruins, and then they were discovered by archaeologists. And some of them we know as some of the wonders of the world. And we started with this book, and the one question we asked all students, and I've done this with students, and we said, hey, do you think Atlantis really existed, the city under the sea that Plato discusses in Greek writing? What evidence from the book supports your belief? Well, I'm not going to read the whole book with you, but I'm going to read you that now that we've limited their focus, students don't need to know about every lost city in every chapter. They need to know specifically about what evidence would support this idea that there was a lost city of Atlantis. So we'll jump into a couple passages from that book. And now we're taking the complexity level up. Now a student has to be able to understand and read multiple passages and make sense of them, so that our challenge level has changed. So in this particular one, Dr. Frankum, do you mind reading the first part about Atlantis?
Sure. The Legend of Atlantis dates back to 360 BC when the Greek philosopher Plato first described it. He said it was an advanced nation whose people lived on beautiful islands. According to Plato, Atlantis sank into the ocean, quote, in a single day and night of misfortune, end of quote. People have searched for the city for thousands of years, but it remains lost.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Muhammad, are you able to unmute and read that next portion?
No, can you hear us? By the way, just for those of you who are literature people does that story on Atlantis sound kind of like the stage play Brigadoon? Remember the city that vanishes and only comes back every 100 years? When Dr. Jake was reading that, it made me think of that. Oh, here's Khaled. He can read now. Go ahead, Khaled.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, no, it's okay. Thank you. Losses are human settlements that became nearly or completely uninhabited. The locations of many of these places have been forgotten. However, these cities have interested people since before Plato wrote about Atlantis, and they continue to spark people's imaginations today. They offer a look into our own ancient past and the promise of new secrets to discover. Atlantis may still hide beneath the ocean waves, but other cities have been found and explored. Okay.
So thank you, Mr. Muhammad. So this is our first passage. This is, we know as the reader, we're being asked to say, do we have proof or evidence that Atlantis existed? Well, we know that it was, so far, what do we know? What do we really know so far? Like, we know in this particular book, you guys can't see it, but there's about 7 other lost cities that are mentioned, and all have really relative evidence that they existed, and archaeologists have discovered them. Atlantis is not one of those cities. It doesn't have a lot of archaeological backing, if any. It just has the writings of Plato, and we'll see how that led to the finding of another great civilization and lost city. Can we go to the next slide? In this particular slide, Dr. Lindley, do you mind reading the city in the poem about Troy, Turkey?
Certainly. The Iliad, an ancient Greek poem written by Homer, tells the story of the Trojan War. In the poem, the great city of Troy was under siege by the Greeks for 10 years. People had searched for the city for hundreds of years, but never found it. Scholars thought Troy only existed in stories. Then in 1871, an excavation in Turkey found the remains of a city matching the description of Troy. As archaeologists dug deeper, they found 9 cities built one on top of another.
So this, in my receipt, when I read it, so I responded to this. So just for today, I just said, I will do my own race strategy and respond to this. There's not a ton of content, but I can see that Troy, the city of Troy, like Atlantis, it had been a relatively big story for a long time, and then Atlantis, unlike Troy, never really had its moment where archaeologists were able to find, even in the ocean, those remnants, enough to the point where it proved what Plato had said. But in this particular Iliad, the Greek poem written by Homer, feels like it got validated. At some point in history, it was validated, and in 1871, that excavation made a lot of proof. So the first city of Troy was built around 3000 BC. Modern excavations have found huge walls like those described in the Iliad. Most archaeologists agree that this is ancient Troy. However, they still debate which layer is the city described in the ancient poem. So, as the writer, I'm going to be responding to this. I'm going to take the information I have. I can't make stuff up. I can only take really what I have. So if we can go to that next passage, I put together my own best race strategies, and I feel free to poke holes in it or challenge me. I don't know everything, but I can sure try. Do you think Atlantis really existed? As the student, I know my focus, and what evidence from the book supports your belief? Well, as I restated, I say the evidence that Atlantis existed is found in pages from the book Lost Cities. The Greek philosopher Plato describes it in detail in his writings. The great city of Troy was believed, like Atlantis, to be fictional until archaeologists found matching remains of Troy in 1871. So as the writer, now I have focus, and I'm saying, look, it happened in Troy. We had an ancient philosopher that wrote about it, and it ended up being true. And I'm trying, as the writer, to draw a connection that it's happened again, that we believe that this could just be just as warranted for Atlantis. So according to the text, Atlantis sank into the ocean. So both lost cities were mentioned in ancient writings by Greek philosophers. And in my closing, and why did I cite those? I said, we are just waiting for archaeologists to find the remains of this once great city of Atlantis. Now, I can't tell you that my proof is perfect, but I can tell you that if someone is reading this, they know that I have a clear focus, a purpose. I'm trying to find evidence in the text, and I'm able to close this out. So if your students at all grade levels have this level of race strategy focus and know how to concentrate their writing, we believe that these strategies will be super helpful in helping them structure their writing based on a response.
And Danny, sorry to interrupt, but as a teacher, I could see so many benefits for this, using this as an exit ticket at the end of the class period, the end of the day, just to see, how much they learned, how much they were able to get from the reading and from the class too. And then I also see this as a great way to develop their writing skills for when they have to do like a 5-paragraph essay when they're getting into junior high and high school and then on to college. Just a great way for them to know how to structure and what needs to be involved, and then how to cite, use the text and information that you do have. I really, really like that, especially like Amber just posted. Yeah, the exit ticket. What a great exit ticket.
Yeah, and the thing I'm thinking too is, Danny, this is pretty complicated, to read about these lost cities. It's not something we can do in primary. However, in primary, we could take the same concept and write it in a story or whatever, because if students will learn that concept at a much lower level in the primary grades, by the time they get to the grade level where they can read a passage like this, and then imagine how that's going to improve their thinking and then their writing, because they can be critical thinkers, critical writers, because we know this process, race.
So Danny, what grade level do you implement this race process in? Because I could see it being implemented in like a kindergarten, first grade, not actually writing it down, but the teacher saying, okay, let's restate what we just read. Okay, let's answer all the parts of the question, et cetera, et cetera. What have you seen that's worked well?
I think exactly what you're saying is the point, is that school-wide, it needs to be the focus. And it doesn't mean that all students are doing it at the same level. By 5th grade, you should be obviously able to take content from multiple passages and write and respond in multiple paragraphs with the structure of race. But in kindergarten, you said it perfectly. It's an opportunity for teachers to set the structure. And when students stay in a system, which that's our goal, right, is to have programs so robust that students stay with us throughout all the years. And we know that students have choice. But when parents and students start to see a system that is every year, it's embedded into your programs and it gets better and better, and it proves and it has results, because I can tell you that race has results. It's just it's so basic in the way we structure it that sometimes we forget to do it. But if we implement it at kindergarten and help walk students through that, show them that structure, by the time they get to second and third grade, they're leaning into their own strengths because they have these tools in their toolbox. They know that, hey, I know how to structure, I know how to pull the most important pieces out of a writing, and I know how to start structuring it. We at least have the template, and then we just every year add layers to this so that they get better and better.
I'm thinking of a math example right now, how this can be applied in math, figuring formulas, figuring how to solve problems and so forth. This very thing could be used, and you're teaching math, but you're teaching reading and writing also.
Absolutely. Thank you for the input, and thank you for the comments in the chat, everybody. Much appreciated. And then I look at this last thing, and I just want to say, students more than ever need your feedback. Everything I'm doing, I don't think that we're saying anything that is so over the top it couldn't be done and structured, within a week. I would say for third grade learners, you may structure a couple days of reading some text, and you may structure a couple, at least, this cycle of reading and then responding. That could take 3 days to an entire week. But if you're getting good results, it's worth the time. If you're getting students to that point where they can think critically and respond to you, it's totally worth your energy and time. It takes a lot out of us as teachers to review writing. It's probably one of the most difficult things that we do, but we need to give students feedback too. And I would encourage you to find a rubric as a team, as your, if it's a 7th grade level team or a 4th grade level team, when you meet in your staff meetings or your professional learning team meetings with your grade level, I would say that at least 3 times a year, you would want to have an opportunity to look at each other's student writing and start to design what really quality writing is looking like in the grade level, and how you can move your struggling writers to that level. And the way they're going to do it is through feedback. And I just put this in here. It's a really short response rubric. And you would, in this particular rubric, the most a student could score is 8 points. And you would, giving them a score is probably less important than them understanding why, what they need to do to accumulate those maximum points. And I think we say it really well in race strategies. Did you know the content? But here it says, in this particular rubric, it says, include valid references or claims from the text. I like that word, claims. We make claims all the time in our writing. Did it come from a valid place? Sometimes students really have a feeling about something, and so they just try to make it work with their opinion, but we don't want that. We want them to really lean into the text. Does it respond to the prompt? So we know if we start with a race strategy, we can give them full points if they restate what the question is asking. Did I directly respond to the prompt? That's the key. So many times we look at our young writers and they just don't have that one little trick, and they go off on a tangent that doesn't help them in their writing. So that first trick is so important. Restate what the question is asking. The next one, include evidence of reflection and analysis of the text. Did they use what they learned in the text to their advantage, to persuade you, to argue with you, to make a point, to make something valid that they're stating? And then evidence includes relevant and sufficient textual evidence. If I come back to you about the great bird, the auk, and say they went extinct, and start talking to you about stuff I liked, I liked that they can cover big areas, but they don't actually know how to fly. Well, that's great. And how many times do students start talking to you about what they're excited about, but don't go back to the text and really make their argument? So sometimes we get lost as learners telling you what we're excited about, but we don't lean back into what we were actually trying to prove. So make sure that students stay focused. And then, do they use complete sentences where errors do not impact readability? in a passage where we're doing this, where we're writing to learn, we're writing to prove a point, to work with you as our colleagues or with our peers, we don't want to get so caught up in errors that we don't let them learn to like love writing. But if their conventions are causing it where they're not making their points clear, then we do have to address conventions. And you know, for your struggling writers, you may be just going back to the basics and teaching them how to write. But in a passage like this, we're already past learning to write. We're really wanting to talk about your ideas, your thoughts, and your structure. So if we're going to talk about their errors, make sure they're errors that are just really not helping them complete a thought. I wouldn't get too caught up in this one with just grammar. This is really about rewarding them as a writer. So let's see. And that's sort of the feedback loop and the structure that we wanted to talk about. Again, it's super specific. We're not talking about the entire writing process. A lot of times in research, they call what I've shown you today is writing aerobics. It's something we do just so we get good at writing. It's an exit ticket. It's something we can do, we can respond to. It's not the end all be all. It's not an entire program, but it is one that most of us lean into because we know that students are going to have this experience of having to respond to writing. So I would encourage you to get students really proficient at this level of process where they think through, respond, and give you race strategies to organize their thoughts. It's the quickest way I can tell you that we can get really good writing responses from students in this feedback loop. I love it, and I think it's been one of the reasons why the schools I've dealt with have been really, really successful.
So Danny, with this rubric, I'm assuming that you go over it with the students well beforehand. They know exactly what's on the rubric beforehand. And then also, do you ever have students grade each other's, like in a group, in a cooperative learning, to use the same rubric so they understand the rubric a little bit better, they get some peer feedback, anything like that?
We do. And sometimes what we'll do is our peer edits will happen like in a format like Google Share, and they'll edit and give feedback from these responses to each other. And they won't even touch paper and pencil. They're just doing this all on computer. And I would tell you, for us, we've had to be very careful not to do everything just paper and pencil. We really have to have students writing on a computer because so many of our tests and assessments at the end of the year are seen on a computer. So if we only give them paper and pencil, we're not necessarily setting up these 21st century learners to be successful on an assessment. So we have to be careful with that too. We got to give them this work in the format that they're going to see it in. So that's a great comment, Dr. Frankum, and it helps me kind of gear like some of that discussion. Yeah, we definitely want it. Peer editing and this rubric can be used in real time in an editing format, just like when we share things in our Google Drive. We see each other when we're editing each other or responding to something we've written. Great way for students to see how somebody else is thinking and learning how to interact with them. It's great.
Excellent.
And in response, just a summary of what we want to take away from today. We just want to make sure we're providing reading opportunities for students that have purpose. And we want to give, how many times do you see sometimes teachers get a little bit behind, or, there's a time for free read. There's a time for, drop everything and read, but when we're setting up the opportunity to read, we want to make sure that reading has purpose. And we want to give students tools for critical thinking and reading. That's why we talked about annotating, note-taking. That's our job, is to make them good thinkers and to take strong notes. I think we've done some presentations called focused note-taking, but note-taking is super important when we're reading. And third, provide a structure for students to effectively respond in writing. And that structure we talked about is the RACE strategy. Okay, so RACE strategy is the structure for effective writing. And then we want to just make sure that we provide feedback. And that's that loop of good writing instruction, is once that student knows how they've done and how they perform based on the rubric or standards that we have, then they can go back to writing, and it's useful to them. If we just put a grade on a paper that's not typically useful in writing, it sometimes shuts our students down. But if we say, hey, I really like what you did here, but we got to go back and make sure that your evidence comes from the text, they can use that, because then you can go right back to it. And it makes your instruction very clear and focused, and it helps us drive our attention in the right way. So I love it. I like the simplicity of it. It doesn't mean it's not complex to do it, but it's simple as the teacher to set these engaging parameters and put the race strategies up on your wall in your classroom, and remind students that there is a total structure for responding.
Yeah. And the important thing to understand, I think, and I think we're all pretty much there, it's repetition when you're doing something like this. First time you try it might not be as successful as you want it to be, but be consistent. And on a totally different workshop and a totally different story, students appreciate consistency. They appreciate knowing what is expected of them. And if the teacher reinforces this strategy that you've just talked about here and keeps it up, if it doesn't work well the first time, try it again. Give it a new way of looking at it, because it will pay off in the lives of, or in the education of the students. So yes, this is wonderful. And I'm checking here, Dr. Jake, have you checked to see if there are some questions that we have just a couple of minutes here. Ooh, we have a couple of minutes.
Yeah, and maybe we answer some of those questions, Dr. Ray, after we conclude and we send out the survey, because usually we like to stay on for another 15 or 20 minutes. There are some questions about teaching this in a primary level, and we hit some mathematics and some science. We might want to bring those up again, but I think if we conclude now and then we post the survey, I did post the slideshow in the chat, so you can go back and you can pull the race writing program right out of the slides and use that. Post that right up in your classroom. Come back, refer to this, show this to your other teachers that weren't able to participate, and start implementing it. It will change the way that you do writing, the way that you do reading in the classroom. So a great, powerful tool that we can all easily implement and utilize.
Yeah, and yeah, that's just this, like the other workshops we do, are for your help, and we don't expect. I mean, I would hope that you as teachers don't expect perfection, but you're going to use this and you keep reinforcing it. When I was learning to drive a car, which was several years ago, I made mistakes. And I had to learn from those mistakes. And so that's why this format is so valuable, because students will make mistakes, and that's where the teacher interferes. And yeah, that's really important. I didn't see any other new questions, Dr. Jake. Let me, Miss Danny, did you have anything else? Are you fairly well through at this point?
Yes, totally. I absolutely thank you for the opportunity, and love working with our friends.
And you know what? The nice thing about this, with those of us at Array Global, this is how we want to help schools. I was in a beautiful, beautiful school today, and really one of the finest schools that we've been in for a long time. Of course, first time we've been able to visit for a year and a half. But you know what? They have the learner spirit, and they want to do better. So they're going to use maybe something that looks a little complicated, but they're going to use it and consistently reinforce it. So thank you, Danny, and so forth. I always like to end these workshops with something a little bit inspirational. And I told Dr. Jake a week ago, this song kept going through my mind that I thought was just really important for us. It's a song that was recorded by Whitney Houston a long time ago. She died a while ago, but the song is titled "The Greatest Love of All." But the song begins this way: "I believe the children are our future." I guess I could sing it to you, but I won't do that. "I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside and give them a sense of pride. To make it easier, let the children's laughter remind us how we used to be." Isn't that beautiful? The words to that song are so meaningful as we're all beginning this new year with a different class of students in some cases, and we're so forth. Remember, these children are our future. So thank you all for attending.